The U.S. pushing for a Mideast peace deal as Secretary of State John Kerry arrives in Jerusalem today. Secretary Kerry will be meeting with both Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Palestinian president. But Mr. Netanyahu already suggesting that peace may not be possible.
News alert on a major winter blast targeting millions of Americans right now as the first big storm of the new year bears down on the Midwest and the Northeast.
Well, the snow already falling in most spots, but the worst is yet to come as high winds combine with heavy snow to create whiteout conditions, making road travel very hazardous. Now, blizzard warnings now posted for parts of New York and across the New England coast where snow totals could reach more than a foot. Meantime, folks in the Midwest digging out from their own pounding, parts of Illinois getting about a foot of snow with more on the way. But snow, not the only weather issue here, with bitter cold gripping much of the Northeast, sending temps plunging into the single digits and lower. And when you factor in wind chill, it feels even worse.
We have live Team Fox coverage now with Garrett Tenney in Chicago, but we begin with our meteorologist Janice Dean of the Fox Weather Center. JD?
Hi, Greg. Yeah, unfortunately, the worst is yet to come. You see some of the snow moving in towards the Northeast. They're getting it in Boston, but the worst of it really coming in the overnight hours and into tomorrow morning. We've got two storms that are going to merge up here and give us our first nor'easter of 2014. Now, the snow totals won't be that impressive. It's not going to be a blockbuster storm, but the problem is the winds. We could see wind gusts in excess of 50 miles per hour. That's why we have blizzard warnings for Long Island and up towards Cape Cod. And take a look at the temperatures as they drop. So we're mainly going to see snow overnight tonight from D.C. up towards New York and Boston. It's going to continue overnight into tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning's commute is going to be difficult, dangerous, if not impossible, all along the I-95 corridor. So people are urged to stay inside. Schools are going to be canceled. And yes, there's going to be a snow day, but the temperatures are going to be so cold, you really don't want your kids playing out in the snow. Look at the wind chill. This is what it's going to feel like by 12 p.m. on Friday. -1 in New York, -12 in Albany, -9 in Boston. So dangerously cold temperatures. You don't want to be outside. Winter weather advisories posted across the Ohio River Valley up towards the Northeast. And again, where I mentioned the blizzard warning for Long Island and Cape Cod with wind gusts in excess of 50 miles per hour. That's going to cause whiteout conditions. People cannot be on the roads. And we're going to see certainly some delays and cancellations at the airport. Those blizzard conditions are going to continue overnight tonight and into tomorrow morning. So people are urged to stay off the roads. And we'll keep you posted. Greg, back to you.
I know that I'm committed to peace. But unfortunately, given the actions and words of Palestinian leaders, there's growing doubt in Israel that the Palestinians are committed to peace.
John Bolton is former U.S. ambassador to the UN and a Fox News contributor. Good to see you. Today is Thursday, I think. All right, good to see you, sir. So,
right, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Well, you listen, Secretary Kerry saying he's not expecting a framework agreement at the end of this trip. But how optimistic are you feeling about what Mr. Kerry might accomplish? Any progress possible during this trip?
Well, I don't think it's possible that there's a settlement in sight, and therefore I think whatever quote-unquote progress may occur isn't going to go very far. And it's not just because there are a lot of very contentious issues that still separate the Israelis from the Palestinians. What would the borders of a Palestinian state be? How would you handle Jerusalem? What would be Israel's military disposition on the territory of a Palestinian state on the West Bank? There's something much more fundamental here. And it goes basically to the absence of any institution on the Palestinian side that's legitimate, that can make commitments and then carry them out down the road. It relates to another aspect, which is what kind of state there would be on the other side of the whatever boundary one might draw. So this is not a disagreement that the parties can negotiate about. There's just a fundamental void on the Palestinian side, unfortunately, that makes, I think, any real peace agreement completely impossible.
Well, as we know, Prime Minister Netanyahu, that conversation is up first. So if you, let's get your fly-on-the-wall assessment of how that dialogue might go.
Well, I think with Secretary of State Kerry, as you could see from the opening remarks, is going out of his way to try and accommodate the Obama administration, to listen to their proposals, to discuss them in a reasonable fashion. Not that Netanyahu thinks there's any prospect of peace with the Palestinians. He has another agenda in mind. He's going to try, as he has, I think, during his tenure in office, he's going to try and cooperate with the Obama administration's efforts on the Palestinian question to show his good faith, because what he wants is for the Obama administration either to act against Iran's nuclear weapons program or cut Israel some slack if, in fact, Israel takes military action against that program. So he's trying to buy a little space on the Palestinian issue that he might need in large quantities on the Iranian nuclear issue.
And still, as you know, though, Mr. Kerry is going to go to Ramallah next to speak to Mahmoud Abbas. As the most crucial liaison and peacemaker, what message from Mr. Netanyahu does Secretary Kerry need to take to Mr. Abbas?
Well, I honestly have to say, it's a perfectly legitimate question, but I have to say, I think this is a complete waste of the time of the Secretary of State of the United States. There are a lot more important issues that threaten American national security than the fruitless pursuit of a Palestinian authority that's not legitimate, that's an authoritarian hangover of a former terrorist organization, that doesn't fully control the territory that people agree would be in a Palestinian state if there were going to be one. I think this is a real misdirection of the time and resources and attention of the Secretary of State away from priorities that, from the U.S. national point of view, are honestly a lot more appropriate. So he can talk to the Palestinians, he can talk to the Israelis. I just honestly don't think it's going to make the slightest bit of difference.
That 10 visits in less than 1 year, nonetheless. Ambassador John Bolton, we appreciate your time this morning and perspective as always, sir.
Thanks again. Thank you.
This year starts with a massive winter storm blanketing almost half of this country. In some places in the continental United States, they are colder than the North Pole. And in other parts of the country, it's whiteout. Drivers urged off the roads. 100 million Americans hunkering down tonight. And our extreme weather team is out in force and right there in the snowdrift. We begin with ABC's Gio Benitez in Chicago. It is piling up. Gio.
It sure is, Diane. Good evening to you from a snowy Chicagoland. It's just getting colder and colder. 12 degrees right here, right now. It feels like 2 below zero. And this stuff isn't just fluffy, it is downright relentless. From blaring sirens in Evanston, Illinois, alerting residents to a snow emergency, to a Chicago whiteout, up to 18 inches of fresh snow in places. The Midwest is a blowing, snowing deep freeze. Officials, too, sounding a warning.
We ask that residents check on the well-being of residents, friends, and neighbors.
The city's full fleet of 287 snowplows and salt spreaders dominate the streets. Snowplows in nearby Rosemont out in force, too, looking like a choreographed ballet. Drivers operating on little sleep, a grueling job, as we found out.
Let's plow.
When it gets heavy, you just got to keep going and going and going and going.
And that's what we do. If you let it build up, we'll never move it.
Lyle Richmond knows that, clearing the snow from his house over and over again. 4 times within the past 24 hours?
Probably a little less than 24 hours, yes.
Wow.
4 times, yes.
The snowy mess also causing chaos in the air. More than 1,900 cancellations across the U.S. as holiday travelers try to get home. Plane de-icers working overtime. More than 500 accidents reported in Michigan. Icy roads all the way to Tennessee and even the mountains of North Carolina. This car flipped on its side on roads that look like glass. In International Falls, Minnesota, that haunting sign, 40 below zero. An opportunity to show the power of the cold temps. This egg went from cracked to frozen solid in a cast iron pan in just 5 minutes. And in a Wichita parking lot, perhaps America's most dedicated worker, gathering shopping carts in blustery sub-zero wind. And you know that chemical salt used to melt snow and ice? Well, it turns out that if the temperature is below 20 degrees, it's pretty useless. But one guy who may need it tonight is ABC's Ron Claiborne. He's live outside Boston tonight. Ron, good evening to you.
Hey, Gio, I'm in Cohasset, Massachusetts, south of... You know, it was where you are there in the Midwest. It could get even worse here as that storm system that you experienced joins with a system coming up from the south to form a very potent NorEaster here in the Northeast.
It started with a light powdering coating the northeast, and then it came roaring in. A powerful nor'easter that pounded the northeast, all the way up to Maine and far inland. In the Boston area, traffic ground almost to a halt on many major highways, and everywhere roads were littered with accidents and spinouts. A pickup truck flipped onto its side in Maine. A semi beached on a highway median, in this photo tweeted by the Massachusetts State Police, and a Massachusetts State Police car victim of a fender bender. In Boston, a snow emergency was in effect. Schools closed, street parking banned, government workers sent home early. In New York City, the heavy snow wasn't due to strike till much later.
Don't panic. Everything will be fine. You'll make it.
The storm was a kind of tale of two cities and two mayors. Boston's Tom Menino, 4 days from leaving office after 20 years.
I guess Mother Nature wanted to give me one more gift. A snowstorm.
And New York City's Bill de Blasio in office for just his second day.
It would have been nice to have a nice calm first day, but we have snow on our mind and we are focused like a laser.
Also on the mind of New York officials, avoiding a repeat of last year's February blizzard, which saw motorists stranded on highways. Late today, New York's governor declaring a statewide emergency and banning all traffic on 3 major interstates near New York City, effective at midnight.
And this is really the epicenter of this nor'easter, this area from south of Boston, including all of Cape Cod. This area is expected to get at least 15 inches of snow before this storm leaves, sometimes a Friday late morning. And that's just the first, Diane, of a 1-2 punch. That second punch is going to be temperatures plunging down, Diane, into the single minus digits. Very cold here in New England. Coming up.
We can tell how frigid it is. Thank you so much, Ron Claiborne, and thank you, Gio, as well.
His condition was defined by his doctors as a critical situation with danger for his life. The situation has not changed, and we're still talking about critical situation with a danger for life. It seems to me that his condition is not getting any better, and we usually understand what happens in such cases.
Secretary of State John Kerry is in Israel right now, meeting for a second day with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, trying to broker a peace deal with the Palestinians. Connor Powell is live in our Mideast bureau. Hi, Connor. What is the goal of this trip?
Well, Secretary Kerry is here for his 10th time in the last year, and immediately upon landing last night, he said the time is near for tough decisions to be made by both parties. Now, Secretary Kerry faces the monumental task of trying to hash out a framework to lead to a more permanent final agreement here. Now, today he is again meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, in addition to other officials. The Secretary of State is hoping to conclude a framework agreement, not a final agreement, but just a framework by the end of April.
The Secretary of State is hoping to conclude a framework agreement, not a final agreement, but just a framework by the end of April.
So he's got about 4 months or so to do this. Now, polls suggest Israelis and Palestinians overwhelmingly support a agreement that ends the conflict here and creates a two-state solution, but politicians on both sides have failed to reach any type of agreement. According to State Department officials, Kerry's not expecting a lot out of this trip right now, but he'll be back here probably once a month or so for the next 4 months and try to just lay the foundation for a more permanent agreement, Patty Ann.
So what specifically, Connor, is holding up the deal?
Well, history for one thing. After decades of violence and conflict, there really isn't much in the way of goodwill between the Israelis and Palestinians. Neither side sees the other as sort of a viable peace partner. But on a larger level, the biggest issue is the borders of a potential Palestinian state and the future of Israeli settlements inside the current Palestinian territories. Right now, there's about 300,000 Israelis living in the West Bank. That is the future Palestinian state. Where they all end up is a major sticking point. The future of the holy city of Jerusalem is also another issue. Both the Israelis and the Palestinians want it as their capital, but perhaps the stickiest issue is security. Israelis are demanding a continued military presence in the future Palestinian state as a way to prevent attacks. The Palestinians, of course, want Israelis out. There are a lot of issues, Patty Ann, but it will take a lot of time to try to hash them out.
Yeah. All right. Connor Powell live for us. Thank you.